Hey team, hope you all are doing well. So another great question. What pace is a 220 marathon? Okay, I know this very well. I was only able to break the 220 marathon barrier one time in my career. I ran 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 35 seconds at the 2007 California International Marathon. I finished in fourth place and as the top American on that particular morning. The stars aligned, everything came together that particular day. That in terms of the pace, I held 5:19 per mile that day and 3:18 per kilometer for the 42.2 kilometers, 5:19 mile pace for the 26.2 miles. So you have to definitely train extremely hard to break the 220 marathon barrier. You also have to train smart, okay? Because if it's not just the talented athletes that go out and break 2 hours and 20 minutes. If you're lacking talent, I promise you, if you have the work ethic, if you're willing to put in the consistent work for a long enough period of time, and I will guarantee you, if you don't have a great deal of talent, it's going to take you probably about anywhere from 5 to 10 years, maybe even over a decade to run this fast, okay? It's an extremely competitive, tough time. Obviously, there's other athletes that run much faster, that break the 210 barrier, 2 hours and 10 minutes, which I believe is probably around 4:56 mile pace, somewhere around there. Might be a little bit faster or slower. But you have to make sure that you are consistent with your training in terms of training well below 5-minute mile pace, well below 3-minute kilometer pace to handle this. I had a lot of different setbacks in order to finally break that 2 hour and 20-minute marathon barrier. And so if you're considering aiming for this particular time barrier and you're questioning what pace is a 220 marathon, it is 5:19 mile pace or 3:18 per kilometer pace. I started running marathons in 2002. My debut was at the 2002 New York City Marathon. I ran 2 hours, 43 minutes, and 36 seconds that day. I was a part of a Armed Forces charity team where we weren't permitted to start the race until every runner had crossed the start line. So I started in 32,189th place. Chase Manhattan Bank was donating $1 for every runner we passed. So I finished 257th overall. I still remember my first mile running over the Verrazano Bridge. It was 16 minutes flat for the first mile. So I was bobbing and weaving through thousands of runners. And so I got to experience what the marathon was like, but I really wasn't able to free myself from the ocean of runners that I was running with until around mile 7 or 8. So it did take a while to finally get away from the thousands of runners that I was, behind and trying to get around throughout that race. So again, the goal was to pass as many people as I could and raise as much money as we could based on what Chase Manhattan Bank was doing. But very few athletes go under this barrier each year. When I broke 220 for the marathon in 2007, there were only 62 men in the entire country here in the United States of America who broke the 2 hour and 20-minute marathon barrier. And it was, for me personally, it was the fastest I had ever run for any distance. But unfortunately, I earned a USA Track and Field Olympic Trials A standard time, which was 2 hours and 20 minutes flat. But I achieved this standard 28 days after the Olympic trials, USA Olympic trials for the marathon were held. Okay, so in that year, the USA Olympic trials for the marathon were held in November of 2007 in New York City. And I ran 2:19:35 on December 5th, 2007. So it was, again, 28 days after the Olympic trials. I tried to achieve the Olympic trials B standard time of 2 hours, 22 minutes, which was then the Olympic trials B standard time at the Chicago Marathon. In 2007, it was the worst heat in the race's history. They actually closed down the race at around a little over 3 hours into the race because it was so hot. And I ran the first half in 1:11, came back the second half very slow. I was walking and jogging pretty much the last half of that race and finished in 2:51:55. So 3 months later, I ran this 2:19:35 in Sacramento. And again, the weather conditions were drastically different. It was around 75 degrees at the start in Chicago, at the 2007 Chicago Marathon when I ran the 2:51:55 after going out in 1:11. And it was about 40 degrees at the start in Sacramento at the 2007 California International Marathon that was held 3 months later. So what pace is a 220 marathon? It's 5:19 mile pace or 3:18 per kilometer pace. You have to really focus and devote your attention to at least 16 weeks, preferably 24 weeks for breaking a 2 hour and 20 minute marathon barrier. There are no guarantees. Even if you have a large amount of talent, you had better have your head on straight to break this barrier. It's already hard enough to break a 3 hour marathon or 2:40 marathon, 2:30, but breaking 2 hours and 20 minutes is it's like the gold standard for most national class to close to elite level athletes that are trying to break this particular time barrier. I mean, you could take an elite athlete that's maybe broken 2 hours and 10 minutes from Kenya or another part of the country, in the United States or somewhere else in the world, and they would have to work pretty hard to run a 220 or sub 220 marathon. So there was nothing special about me in terms of my work ethic, my drive to break this particular barrier. My goal again was to break 2 hours and 22 minutes, but I always visualized running much faster than my previous best time prior to doing this, which was 2 hours, 43 minutes, and 36 seconds. I did make a slight improvement on this, running 2:40:02 at the 2007 Grandma's Marathon. I went out the first half in 1:10:29. I was still on 2:28 marathon pace through the 20-mile mark. I think it was around 1 hour and 53 minutes through the 20-mile mark, but slowed down drastically in the last 10K. Again, hydration, improper pacing, a lot of that stuff went into reasons why I just was not nailing it in 2007. And I was learning, okay, going out 1:10:29 through the half, you already know I was going for a fast time. And I was going for that sub 222. I was trying to get that standard before the November USA Track and Field Olympic trials, marathon trials were held. So I failed there again. So again, a lot of failures along the way. It's not just a 2:19:35 fell on my lap. You got to accept the fact that you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have bad workouts, you're going to have poor races along the way, you're going to have poor workouts along the way. But if you stay consistent and you believe in what you're doing and you truly want to break this barrier, then you will have to be tenacious about it. Okay, all I did from 1992 until 2018 when I retired from the sport was think about running. Okay, I was still doing other things, I had other things going on in my life, but I wanted to run at the top level, and I knew I only had a minimal amount of talent, and I had to rely on my work ethic. I had to put that particular piece of the success puzzle together in order to make up for what I lacked. Okay, so yes, I did have some form of genetic talent. I mean, I learned early on that I was able to run a decent time for the mile, a decent time for 2 miles, but I had to rely on my work ethic. I had to continue to put in that hard work. So I'm only sharing this story because I know there's other athletes out there that are trying to break the 2 hour and 20 minute marathon barrier, and you may be one of them. Or maybe you're trying to break 4 hours or 5 hours to the marathon, or even 6 hours. Whatever your goal time is, whatever your race distance is, you have to believe in yourself. You have to be willing to put in the work regardless of what the weather conditions like outside are like, whether it's windy, whether it's cold, whether it's super hot. You have to make up for that. There's days where you're going to have to get on the treadmill. You're going to have to put in your tempo runs or your fartlek workouts on the treadmill because it's just too dangerous outside. If there's ice on the roads and you're just not going to hit your splits, then get on a treadmill. Start making the right decisions. Okay? So that's my answer in terms of what pace is a 220 marathon. If you want to run 2:19:59, you must hold at a minimum of 5 hours or 5 minutes and 20 seconds per mile, or 3:19 per kilometer, and that's just to break 2:20. Okay, again, when I ran 2:19:35, it was 5:19 mile pace and 3:18 kilometer pace because I ran a few seconds below the 220 marathon barrier. But 2 hours and 20 minutes flat is 5:20 per mile or 3:19 per kilometer. So make sure that you're visualizing yourself succeeding, visualizing yourself getting below this barrier, but also make sure you're tenacious in what you're doing. Set your training up correctly. There are training plans as well as running courses on RunDreamAchieve.com that are there for you. Other resources below this video. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave me a comment. Any questions about regardless of what distance you're aiming for, or if it's something psychological or another type of question that you have, running or non-running related, feel free to reach out to me. I will definitely respond. So I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you all in the next video.